On July 25th, we left Fort Pierce and headed due east for approximately 13 miles before heading northwest to Brunswick. Nightfall came and we started seeing lots and lots of stars in the sky when all of a sudden we saw an object flitting around just to our west. There weren't any lights on it, but it did create a void in the stars. We watched it for a while thinking that maybe it was a UFO and we'd be taken aboard by aliens. But after a few minutes we concluded that it was just a drone. Pretty soon it disappeared and a helicopter appeared out of the north. It hovered for a bit and then left. The remainder of the night was pretty peaceful. We were on a direct line to the entrance of Brunswick when the military hailed us on Channel 16. They told us that we were heading into a practice area and that we needed to change course to 270 or due west. We went approximately 6 miles when I contacted them to see if it was clear. They told me that I could change course but could not go any greater than 0 degrees. They sent a helicopter out and it just set off our starboard until they saw that we made the corrections and headed off. This sent us close to the St. Mary's ship lanes and restricted area for Florida fishing and game. But when we got to the restricted area, there were no buoys or markers to show us the area, so we assumed that the chart was old and the markers had been removed. We crossed the first ship lane and just crossed the second one when we saw the doozy of a storm approaching. We watched the lightning and heard the thunder and saw that we were just at the edge of the storm because we could see the tail of it at the west. We decided to turn around and headed back to the first ship lane and then hove to. The storm passed in front of us, but we still got drenched pretty good, and there were a few lightning bolts that passed above us. The storm passed and we made it to the St. Simon buoy. As we made the turn, another storm appeared out of the east. We stayed a little ahead of it and got to the St. Simon marker that was the entrance to the channel leading to Brunswick. We planned to drop anchor at marker 9 as it was pitch black, but when we got there, there was a huge boat just sitting. It was moving at about 1.5 knots, but there was no sounds. Later we discovered it was a gambling boat that goes out 3 miles and stops for a few hours and heads back. We proceeded down to marker 7, which looked to be out of its range, and turned left to get out of the channel and find a spot for an anchor. Just as we dropped anchor, the ship moved and started heading toward us. We came down to about marker 8 and then turned around and headed back to marker 9. It was then that we saw a large number of lights on the back of the ship. We headed below and set the PC to ensure we wouldn't drag and then went to bed. The next morning I went above to see how we were doing and found that we had drug anchor from marker 7 to marker 5 and we were pretty close to Jekyll Island. We pulled anchor, then headed back into the channel and on down to Brunswick. For some reason, when I shut the lid on the PC, it stopped the navigation program while I was running. Not sure why, as I had done this many times without incident. I met Storm Loss when I was working at SunTrust in Atlanta, and we remained friends on Facebook for quite a while. When I wrote that we were heading to Brunswick, she contacted me telling me that she had moved and now lives in Darien, about 30 minutes north of Brunswick. Star came down multiple times to visit and take us shopping or out to eat. We took her for a sail, but when we got to the channel, the waves were brutal, so we turned around and just sat and talked. pulled the jib, mainsail, and sailbag off the boat to clean the salt water off and prepare for the additional hurricanes. We decided that we'd put the sailbag and mainsail back on since we didn't think we could get it on without Nick's help. After getting the sailbag and the mainsail back on, I wrapped and tied the rope around the sailbag to keep it from getting caught in the wind. We took Nick back to Texas and we stayed a couple of days before heading back. We'd gotten back to Brunswick and turned on the weather and found that Harvey, which had just been named the day we left, was now a full-fledged hurricane and was headed for Port Aransas. It hit Dickinson with about 50 inches of rain. Our rain gauge measured 19 inches in a single day. Nick kept us informed on how the water was and where it was in the house. It was an inch from the door sill before it started receding. We really lucked out as we did not have any damage, but the neighbors on both sides of us were flooded and had to replace their floors and cabinets. The people behind us were about 6 foot lower and were pretty well wiped out. One of Star's love was playing pickleball. No, we hadn't heard of it either. But she was in this club in Darien, and when Darien had a street fair, we saw a pickleball demonstration. Our close friends Tom and Terry from Indianapolis, who we know for quite a while, came down from Tybee Island, where they own a condo, to Brunswick to visit. They took us down to Amelia Island to have shrimp at the Salty Pelican. We had a great time and were so glad to see our friends that we hadn't seen in about a decade. Irma was heading up from Key West, so Wanda and I took the Bimini and Dodger and stored them below, also to protect the boat. As it got closer, we added more dock lines and secured the boat next to us to keep it from banging into us. Irma hit on September 11th with Wanda and Gracie staying up at the clubhouse, and I stayed on the boat and sometimes went up to the clubhouse. The normal tide ranges between 4 and 9 feet, but there was a 12-foot surge that threw the water over the banks and into the parking lot. The winds hit 70 knots at one time when the eye was only 100 miles away from us. Through the night, we only lost power a few minutes a couple of times. 2 days after Irma passed through, we drove to Brunswick, and it was a mess. Lights and trees were down, roofs had been blown off, power was down, streets were closed. The causeway over St. Simon's was closed as it was hit worse than Brunswick.
Gracie, hush.